Wants more from the Prime Minister as well. I want to bring in my panel, Liberal Senator James Paterson and Labor MP Annika Wells. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks, Patricia.
So, James, Gladys Liu backtracked on her claim she cannot recall her membership of a group linked to China's foreign influence operations in a statement issued today. That's a pretty significant contradiction. What do you make of it?
Well, I welcome Gladys's clarification in her statement today. I think that was an important thing to do and the right thing to do. But on the facts available, on the evidence available, there's some serious overreach going on here from the Labor Party. I mean, if everybody had to resign after a bad Sky News interview, there will be no one left in the Parliament, Patricia. OK. It's a good line you've got there, but it's not accurate. This is not just a bad interview on Sky News where someone forgets a policy. This is forgetting your links to Chinese government organisation. This is not some little thing. It's not just a bad interview. How do you answer her forgetting something so key? Well, Gladys has clarified that as appropriate, put out a statement today correcting the record, and that's what she should do when that was made clear to her that that was the case. But comparing this to Sam Dastyari is a serious overreach here, Patricia. Let's talk about what happened with Sam Dastyari. Sam Dastyari, in a meeting with Wang Zhangmo, advised him that he believed that he was under surveillance by national security agencies, potentially Australian national security agencies or allied national security agencies, and advised him of how he should evade that scrutiny by leaving their mobile phones in his house while going out onto the balcony to have a private conversation out of the reach of the potential eavesdropping by national security agencies. That is a far, far, far more serious issue, and that is just one of Sam Dastyari's many, many transgressions. So to compare him with Gladys is seriously unfair. OK, so on what she has done, I mean, you saw that interview. She avoided this issue about the South China Sea. She didn't remember her links to organisations. Don't you think that's a significant issue she needs to answer more questions on? Her words on the South China Sea were not as clear as they should be, but she's a backbencher who's been a Member of Parliament for about 3 months. She's not the Foreign Minister. It's a complex legal matter. I think if you ask most federal members of Parliament to explain the ins and outs of the status of the law of the South China Sea, there'd be more than one who would struggle, and not just ones in their first term. I
don't know if you're right about that, because it's been a very high agenda item in the political sphere. In fact, I know the policy off by heart. I know MPs that enter Parliament actually do know the policy because it is such a big debating point in Australia. Are you really saying that people don't know that Australia is concerned about the Chinese build-up in the South China Sea?
I'm saying that not every federal member of Parliament can perfectly articulate complex policy matters in television interviews. As I'm sure you know from your experience interviewing us from time to time, Patricia, we do get caught up on details. We cannot be topic area experts in every single issue that comes before the Parliament, although we certainly do try. OK, I'll ask you one more question before I get to Annika. Dave Sharma says perhaps there's maybe a racial issue here because, of course, she's a culturally Chinese, born in Hong Kong. Do you agree? I think rightly the political class and the media are much more attuned to and much more sensitive to issues of possible foreign interference than we were in the pre-Sam Dastyari world. I think politicians should be held to a higher standard and we should only point out racism when there's actually good, strong evidence of racism. We shouldn't use that as a defence. OK, so there's no evidence in your view of racism here? Well, I haven't seen anything that was racially tinged in Andrew Bolt's interview last night or in the commentary today, no.
OK. Annika, has an attempt to influence Gladys Liu been established?
I think to pick up on what Senator Paterson was saying and to be a bit more precise about the question is that it's a test for the Prime Minister because the Liberal Party made the question of Sam Dastyari a test for Bill Shorten. So on a personal level, I feel for Gladys today. We're both members of the class of 2019 together and she's having a tough day being chased around the house. But we're in this situation because there are so many questions around these circumstances, and the answer that the PM gave in the House today in question time didn't resolve those questions. Rather, it threw up more because, like you say, Patricia, he said that the test is whether money changed hands, and there are still a number of outstanding questions about the 300 grand that was donated or returned for the Chisholm campaign that we still have to hear answers for, and that's on the government to provide us with those answers.
Are you satisfied, Annika, with Gladys Liu's explanation? She has detailed her explanation in a statement. She's now backed the government's policy quite quite clearly on the South China Sea, and she's also said she'll audit the organisations she's in.
Like I said, I'm not interested in taking a swing at Gladys as a fellow member of Class 2019, but my preference would be that when we're dealing with these matters, that they are dealt with in the House, and my preference would be that these statements are made in the House and not on Twitter.
Annika, do you understand how it looks for Labor? Because, you know, if we look at this foreign interference issue, there was Sam Dastyari, there's ICAC at the moment in New South Wales where allegations are being raised and canvassed. Labor's not exactly clean, if I can use that word very loosely, on these issues.
I think if you look at the questions that we put during question time today, they weren't to or about the member for Chisholm, they were to the Prime Minister, and I think that's the appropriate position for us to use at the moment, because it's a question of what he is going to do. It is his leadership that is being tested here.
OK, so do you think he should get rid of Gladys Liu or ask her to leave the Liberal Party?
I think first and foremost, we deserve a better answer from him on the questions that are still outstanding. Let's hear those answers and then see what steps should be taken once we have those answers. OK,
let's move to another topic, and I'll start with you on it, Annika. Yesterday, Kim Carr raised concerns about the party capitulating to the government. I think the issue is around this farm vegan terrorist bill, as it's being called very elaborately. Are you capitulating?
Well, firstly, on that bill specifically, we're going to move a number of amendments to try and improve the bill, and we're moving those amendments on the basis of what came back from the Senate committee inquiry into that bill. Speaking more broadly, I think we even spoke about this last time I was on your program. I think that we have to plot a course through the middle. We can't oppose everything for the sake of opposing everything. We can't support everything without doing our best to improve it. Our job is to hold the government to account, and that's what we'll do in opposition. And hopefully we do it well enough to become the government ourselves.
We've heard a former party president and current party president offer their thoughts on the future of the Labor Party.
Yes.
Do you agree with Wayne Swan that the climate and the economic agenda shouldn't just be thrown away?
Oh, I think it was a bit of a draw between those two, and if anyone was the winner, it was the author of the book, whose launches they were both attending as they gave their speeches.
OK, so a draw. Where does that mean you line up?
Oh, I just, like James said, it's actually been 4 months since we were first elected to Parliament, but I'm still trying to work out where the printer goes in my Parliament House office. The idea that we should have already reconsidered, analysed, taken in all the feedback, put together revised policies and be putting them out so shortly after an election loss is not only, a form of madness, but is, I think, disrespectful to all the branch members whom we rely upon as members of the Labor Party, and then to our constituents more broadly. I'm doing mobile offices every Saturday morning, and let me tell you, I have not gotten even a quarter of the way around the electorate yet to be able to say that I have properly canvassed all my constituents about all of those policies, to be able to represent their views fairly and accurately in the caucus with respect to what we keep and what we junk.
OK. Fair enough. If you need any help with printers, I'm great with printers at the moment. James, Minister for Natural Disasters and Drought, David Littleproud, says he has no idea if climate change is man-made, which seems strange given most scientists do know. Is climate change man-made?
I accept the science on climate change, Patricia, yes.
Is it unhelpful for a minister so senior, in fact in charge of key areas, to not be sure?
Well, I think David Littleproud's a little bit more concerned with his day-to-day job, which is managing the response to the fires that are wreaking havoc through Queensland and New South Wales at the moment. I think his day-to-day duties are more important than philosophical debate about the science of climate change on a television program, all due respect to television programs such as this one. OK, fair enough. But really, is it just some sort of philosophical argument? Science is not philosophical, it's actually fact-based. I think you know the point I'm making, Patricia. I don't think it's material to the government's response right now to an immediate crisis, which the priority is putting the fires out and looking after the people who've been affected.
James, staying with you on drug testing, because we began the week with this discussion on the drug testing trial, and clearly there's been a bit of a hiccup because it seems that Jackie Lambie, a crucial crossbencher, is not so keen on that bill. Russell Broadbent was on this program and said he was concerned that the trial would require older people to be subjected to a drug test. Is that a concern, that it would sort of be quite humiliating or offensive to older people who, in some cases, are now stuck on New Start?
Not for me, Patricia, and I have to say, frankly, I think it's a little bit patronising to say that old people are any less equipped to deal with these issues than younger people are. Old people were young people once too, and they've lived normal lives like everyone else. They're no less able to take a swab in their mouth to test whether they have drugs in their system. In fact, if they're pulled over in a random roadside test in Victoria by the police, they will quite often have to do that, both be breathalyzed for alcohol and do a swab test for drugs. So unless we're planning to exempt older people from that, I don't understand why we'd exempt them from this.
OK. Annika, I'd love to get your views on this, because it's actually the Labor Party as well that's been making this point about older people on New Start. And, you know, as you've tweeted, I've seen, you're a millennial in the Labor Party, you've made it into the Parliament. What do you think of this kind of age argument that Labor's making? Is it fair that young people are subjected to these tests any more than old people? What's the argument there?
I don't think it's an argument so much as pointing out the consequence, because we know that the average person on New Start is a woman in her mid-50s. The argument that we are making, which is also the argument we are making when it comes to the climate emergency, so on both of those matters that you've just spoken to James about, it's about evidence and not ideology. And I think in both these instances, the government is making decisions based on ideology and not evidence. All the evidence on these trials from both New Zealand and the US say that this doesn't work, and we had somewhere between 20 and 30 different drug and alcohol groups through ACOS come to Canberra this morning to tell parliamentarians that this doesn't work, and that we have to do things differently if we want to cure people of addiction. So we need to use evidence and not ideology in both those issues. OK, but in your view, are you also worried about young people being subjected to this? Because obviously it's a more palatable argument, or I don't know, Labor's decided it's perhaps easier to make the argument if it focuses on oldies. Oh, I'm happy to say I'm worried about young people too. It's not edifying, it's not effective, and it's not cost efficient either. It's something like, I think, $11,000 per participant to drug test them, and New Start recipients only get $14,400 odd a year. And this is from a government that won't raise the rate. They're choosing to put $11,000 per participant towards this measure instead. Unbelievable.
So on that, James, I'll bring you back in. The government's tried to do this, but it looks like it's been unsuccessful. I mean, do you think that if you perhaps looked at it in terms of a suite of measures around welfare, including perhaps a New Start rise, which many people have been arguing for, it would be perhaps more acceptable to people?
I'm not quite ready to wave the white flag just yet, Patricia. Let's see how this debate goes. Jackie Lambie herself has had a mixed range of responses to the proposal, I think it'd be fair to say, over the last few days. If the Labor Party is so absolutely convinced that this will not work, then I'm not sure what they have to fear from this proposal, because it's only a trial. It will only affect 5,000 people, and we want to do a trial because we want to make sure that it does work before it will be rolled out on a national scale. So it's the best opportunity that the Labor Party has, if they're so convinced that it will be unsuccessful, to allow us to test to see if it works, and if the results are clear that it doesn't work, well, then it won't proceed. But if, as I suspect, the results show that it does help people get off drugs and it does help them get into work, then I think there'll be a very compelling case for it to be rolled out on a national level, and maybe that's why the Labor Party is opposing it. They fear that it will work and they don't want to see it rolled out on the national level. For what reason, I don't know.
Just briefly, Annika, I know you've given a speech about intergenerational equality. What are your concerns?
Well, my concern is that this year is the first year where there are more Australians born after 1980 than before, and that's a big statistic. I often have to say it twice. There are now more Australians born after 1980 in the country than born before 1980, and yet there's just this lethargy from this third-term government about the issues of intergenerational inequality, because millennials now earn something like 20% less than their parents did at the same age. Wealth in households under 35 hasn't shifted in something like 15 years, and we all know the smashed avocado debate. I won't hop into it with the time we've got left, but I spoke specifically about the way that the budget failed millennials millennials because it's not addressing any of these issues. And we had new stats out from the Grattan Institute this week that shows those figures are getting worse. So as a millennial, I'm here to bang the drum and try and get something done about it.
Okay, James, I think you're a millennial too, right?
He is.
I think I qualify, yes.
I just want to check. I mean, you look like a millennial. Just very briefly, is
Long
there an
may
issue?
that be the case.
No, well, we'll continue, but then you'll be an old millennial. It all happens to all of us.
Sadly.
Are you concerned too about this issue of, millennial equality, or the fact that millennials are earning less money than
Yeah, I've got to say, I'm pretty
boomers?
sceptical about that statistic. I think most economic evidence shows that this generation is more prosperous and better off than every generation before it. The one area where there might be some agreement between myself and Annika is on the issue of housing affordability. I think that is definitely an issue for young Australians. There were some really positive measures in the budget on that, particularly the Super Saver scheme that will help young people build a deposit to buy a home. But I think governments at all level, particularly local and state governments that have some really important levers around the supply of land, zoning of land and planning regulations, have to do more collectively together to improve housing affordability, because that is a huge issue for my peers, my generation, that's for sure.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. The full millennial panel, so we're not afraid to talk to millennials here. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thanks.